Coming up on this special anniversary episode of Omnivore, the future of agri-tech innovation, making food science cool on social media, and artificial intelligence in the future of food. It's the best of Omnivore from the editors of Food Technology Magazine and the Institute of Food Technologists.
This episode of Omnivore is brought to you by IFT membership. Connect with our diverse community and discover a world of new opportunities. Explore the benefits of membership at ift.org/membership.
Welcome to Omnivore from IFT and Food Technology, where we're revisiting some of our best conversations of 2024 with food system thought leaders. I'm Bill McDowell. If you want a pragmatic, science-based reflection on the future of agriculture, a conversation with Robert Saik is a great place to start. An outspoken expert on all things agricultural, Saik is an author, consultant, and entrepreneur who has the ear of technology and food system leaders ranging from Bill Gates to the Agriculture Ministry of Nigeria. Last spring, Saik discussed what he sees as the danger of a non-science mindset on the global agri-food system with Food Technology's Mary Ellen Kuhn.
Well, let's start at the beginning. You grew up on a farm in a tiny community in Canada. What about that experience made you want to make agriculture your life's work? And did you ever think about not doing that?
Yeah, both sets of grandparents were Ukrainian farmers, so I'm 100% Ukrainian agricultural background. Graduated with a high school of 18 graduates, so it was always a small town. But following my degree at the University of Alberta, I really became enamored with technology, especially the integration of computers in agriculture. And my background with plant physiology, soil chemistry, and crop nutrition has really led me to do all the things that I've done. And I just find it so fascinating. And you know, for a farm kid, if you would have sat me down at 16 years old and said, Rob, this is going to be your life, you know, I would have said BS. But my life has been very, very rich and full because of agriculture, and it continues to be so.
Well, you've written and spoken about the fact that non-science is the single biggest threat to being able to feed the world. So I was hoping we could talk about that. How worried are you about the impact of a non-science mindset?
Well, I'm very worried about it. And in the next book I want to write, which I think is going to be called Pragmatic, I want to talk about the alignment of consumers with agriculture. You know, consumers, if you ask them how much chemical do you want in your food, the answer will always be zero. Well, food is all chemistry, and that's a misalignment between what's factual and what's not. And now that we're testing in parts per billion, you know, these things have to be put into context of benefit versus risk. What are the benefits for the environment with various practices that the consumer understands very little about? And, you know, a trade-off between using extensive cultivation to control weeds on a field or using a pop can of herbicide sprayed over the length of a football field with water as a carrier, which is the better environmental and consumer trade-off? These are some of the discussions I think that we need to have. And I can only, use as an example the three letters GMO to illustrate the disconnect between consumers and their awareness of genetic engineering and the evolution of plant breeding versus what their thoughts are around those three GMO letters.
Well, I'm glad you brought up GMOs because I was going to ask you about that. What's the potential for consumers to actually get comfortable with the idea of genetically modified organisms? Is there hope?
It's not only hope, it's the answer. I mean, when you think about the pressures facing farmers to produce more, because exporting nations need to produce more, they need to reduce their environmental footprint. They need to protect the environment, and in some cases, they need to restore the environment. We cannot do all of that. We can't do all of that, have crops that use fewer inputs, have crops that respond to climate change, have crops that use water more efficiently, have crops that are nutrient dense, have crops that are safe have crops that are reliable for the consumer at a low cost, at a convenient availability, without employing modern technologies such as genetic engineering. You can't have all of those things and then handcuff agriculture from using the science that's necessary to get us there, such as our messenger RNA technology. You can't have both. You can't have agriculture do all of these things to produce, reduce, protect, and restore without utilizing the science that can get us there. So genetic engineering, call it gene editing, call it GMOs, whatever you want to call it, is absolutely fundamentally necessary to ensure agricultural's infinite sustainability.
Is it fair to say that's become one of your important life missions, getting that kind of message out?
Yes. Well, the keynote speeches I've given internationally, the work I've done as an agronomist in places like Uganda. I have shares in a farming operation there, as well as the work I've done in Kenya, Nigeria, and all around the world, South America. And if you travel to Argentina, you'll know that that's one of the most advanced agricultural or no-tillage practiced farming in the world. It has given me a lot of motivation, because I fear and I worry about a mom, 33-year-old single mom raising 2 or 3 kids on a limited budget, and her going to the grocery store and being fearful of food because of the labels on the packaging that are absolute nonsense, like non-GMO spinach, non-GMO pasta. This is all nonsense. It's lying to the consumer and creating fear about something that they need not be afraid of.
Well, no doubt that fear is a powerful motivator.
Well, and there's a lot of people selling fear, Mary Ellen. A lot of people profit from fear.
Well, I want to go back to a term that you used earlier in the interview, and that's the word pragmatist. When it comes to agriculture and the need to feed the world, what makes you a pragmatist?
Well, the understanding about the basic science of agriculture. So if you're going to grow corn, it takes 1.5 pounds of nitrogen to grow a bushel of corn. So you're going to grow 200 bushels of corn per acre. You need to have 350 pounds of nitrogen per acre. This is pragmatically the truth. So that nitrogen has to come from somewhere. Either it's going to come from a degradation of organic matter, which again is very, very detrimental to the environment and greenhouse gases, or it's going to come from legume crops or pulse crops that fix a portion of their nitrogen through nitrogen fixation, or it's going to come from fertilizer. Those are your choices. So when people talk about the elimination of nitrogen fertilizers by agriculture, that's not pragmatic. That dog don't hunt. You need to make sure that we have the adequate 350 pounds of nitrogen go 200 bushels of corn. Now, are there technologies that we can use to make that nitrogen more efficient? That's called NUE, nitrogen use efficiency. The answer is yes. Is it in the farmer's best interest to make nitrogen use more efficient? Yes. Is it in the environment's interest to make nitrogen use more efficient? Yes. So instead of hammering farmers with sticks, we should be encouraging them with carrots. And North American and Argentinian farmers, for example, are very, very good at nitrogen utilization, whereas because of climatic conditions and farming types of farming, China and India are very poor at nitrogen use efficiency. So again, we have to be pragmatic about where we are looking to solve the problems, and we should be actually pushing some farmers up on a pedestal in terms of what they're actually doing with their environmental stewardship.
When you were talking in your food technology interview about sustainable intensification of agriculture, is that what you're describing?
Yes. I mean, if you think about the dairy industry, for example, today there are about 9 million dairy animals, dairy cows in the United States. In 1950, there were 25 million. So 25 million dairy cows in 1950 and 9 million today, producing more milk and doing it in a much more environmentally sustainable manner than in 1950. This is referred to as sustainable intensification. The same thing with land. They're not making any more land. And in very many areas of North America, some of the best land is being paved over for urban sprawl. So how are we going to feed an increasing population, whether that population gets to 9 billion or 10 or 11, call it even 9 billion people? That will require the exporting nations of the world, including the United States, Canada, Australia, Argentina, Brazil, France, to actually do more, to punch above their weight. So the only way to achieve that and feed the population and do it environmentally sustainably is something called sustainable intensification, where we grow more food through sustainably intensifying the amount of product, the amount of output versus the amount of input on a given acre or given animal.
Well, I'd like to just wrap up asking you about what's coming up. I believe you have another book potentially coming up. What are you going to be focusing on?
I have a lot of work to do in the area of the book, but it's going to be entitled Pragmatic, with a capital A and a capital G. The book Pragmatic will look at the reality of agriculture in various parts of the world. So I'll call up my friend Roberto Pierietti from Argentina, where he's been practicing no-till for almost 40 years, and we'll talk about the pragmatism of no-tillage and how does that work? And then we'll talk to some folks down in Western Australia about drought tolerance and the pragmatism of how do we deal growing crops in very, very arid climates. And then I want to talk to some livestock people because, again, I think that the impression that consumers have about farmers with a straw hanging out of their mouth and a straw hat on and bib overalls and round fendered pickup trucks and a little red barn in the background is totally out of sync with the reality of modern agriculture. If you sit in a tractor or a combine or a sprayer today, that's like sitting in the cockpit of an F-17 fighter. I mean, the amount of computing inside of farms is truly incredible, and I'd like to try to bridge that gap of understanding.
Well, that sounds fascinating. We'll look forward to that. And again, thank you so much for chatting with the Omnivore podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me, Mary Ellen. It's always a pleasure to be working with you folks.
AgTech advocate Robert Saik is a renowned agrologist and agricultural advisor based in Sylvan Lake, Canada. Read more of his thoughts on a pragmatic, science-based approach to food production in the April issue of Food Technology. We'll be back with more Omnivore in a moment, but first, this word from our sponsor.
IFT is the convener of the global food system. As a member, you'll cultivate your professional network within our global community, stimulate new ideas with the latest research and trends, and accelerate your growth with expert training and resources. Why wait? Visit ift.org/membership to join IFT today.
Welcome back to Omnivore. I'm Bill McDowell. When a lab-coated Brittany Towers Lewis slides into view on screen, she's already on fire. In her popular 60-second TikTok and Instagram videos, the 34-year-old food scientist delivers quick-hit lessons in everything from why popcorn pops to ensuring a safe storage temperature for leftover rice. Branding herself as the Black food scientist, Towers Lewis has built an audience of 141,000 followers on Instagram and more than 86,000 on TikTok. She tells science and technology editor Julie Larson-Brisher that her mission is to make food science less boring and more accessible to the general public.
Well, this is a great opportunity to talk with the TikTok celebrity, Brittany. So who is Brittany Towers Lewis, aka the Black food scientist?
Great question. Brittany Towers Lewis. So I did.
Yeah, Lewis.
Lewis is my official last name. So I am a food scientist. It's funny because people always ask me, like doing social media, they're like, are you actually a food scientist? And I was like, yeah, that's actually what I do. So like some people on the internet pretend that they're something, but they're actually not. So I've been in the food industry for over 10 years. I majored in food science at Ohio State University. So I have a bachelor's and master's degree in food science. I actually didn't start out as a food science major, didn't know food science existed. I was a biology major until the middle of my junior year. And I changed my major like near the end of college, which is kind of crazy. But I always tell people that it's never too late to do something that you're really passionate about. And that's like a real testament to what I did. And I'm so glad that I changed my major because I absolutely love food science. Like it's so fun. It actually helped me understand science a lot better because food is something that I eat every day and that people eat every day. So it made science more relatable and more tangible for me. So glad that I found it. I've had a few different careers within the food industry, all spanning mostly with product development. So helping create new products for people, which I really love. It's really fun to work on something and then see it at the store and then having people buy it. So that's always the best part.
Well, now, what was the trigger? What was the moment that you went, nah, biology, nah?
Yeah, so I started getting into like the major classes and I was taking one. It was on like evolutionary biology. It was so boring. I was like, this class, I could not pay attention. I was like, this class is the most boring class I've ever taken in my life. And this is not something that I'm interested in. Like, there are definitely people that are interested in it. I was not one of those people. So I was like, I need to make a change because I need to do something that I actually really enjoy and that I find interesting and that I'm at least somewhat passionate about. So funny, my mom actually told me about the food science major when I was a freshman in college. It was in the College of Agriculture. I was like, Mom, I'm not trying to be a farmer. Like, I don't want to major in food science. Ignored it. I revisited it because I was thinking about nutrition. I was like, that's something I'm interested in. I was like, food science, maybe I'll like go revisit food science again. I talked to one of the advisors there and I was like, this is probably where I should be. The first food science class I took, because I had all the prereqs, thankfully. So that was like not as much of a hurdle to go into food science. The first food science class I took, we made ice cream. We got to pick our kind of like the experiment we got to do. So my group made ice cream with different types of sugar to see how the ice cream would turn out, depending on the type of sugar you use. And I was like, yep, this is the place I need to be. I absolutely love ice cream. So I was like, oh, I get to like make food. This is great. I get to eat it. Wonderful.
Well, during your career so far, what's your favorite product development moment?
When I got out of school, I started working on Gatorade, which is a really cool brand to work on, especially for someone that like likes fitness. I had like just got into running then. So like the day before I graduated grad school, I actually ran my first half marathon, which was a lot of fun. So I was like, oh, cool. I get to like work on Gatorade as a brand. And so I've worked on US Gatorade and I got to develop flavors, which is always fun to develop new flavors. And then I worked on international Gatorade and actually launched, which I don't think it's around anymore, but internationally, like in Latin America, launched a new platform called the Gatorade football formula, football being soccer. So soccer is the biggest sport in the world, which was really cool. Soccer is not a sport that I necessarily played or knew a lot about. But I got to go to Mexico, got to go to Brazil and like talk to a lot of players about their needs. So the product was meant for, since in soccer, they don't get a lot of breaks like in football or basketball to take in either hydration or energy. So the product was meant to give them the energy they needed for a full 90 plus minutes for a match. So that product was really fun. I learned a lot about soccer, a lot about players. So I just thought that was really fun to work on.
When did the light bulb go on for you in terms of using social media to communicate food science concepts?
During the pandemic, in 2020, I think as kind of a lot of the vaccines are rolling out, I noticed obviously on the internet, there's a lot of misinformation. But in general, I noticed a lot of people were scared because they were like, all this stuff is coming out. I'm hearing all this information. And science, I don't get it. It's big, scary, confusing. And I don't understand. I don't know who to trust. Science isn't for me, things like that. And I'm like, what can I do? Because before that, I would do a lot of stuff with like kids in high school, kind of like we would bring food science and the food industry to them. And it'd be really exciting to see kids be like, oh, this is another avenue of science that I can go into. I don't have to be a chemist mixing stuff together. you can actually do something that's a little more creative in a sense within science. So I was like, okay, what can I do? I find food science very relatable to people without a science background because everyone has to eat. So it's very easy to relate science concepts to food because a lot of people cook. A lot of people do things that they don't realize have a science backing when they're cooking. They're like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but when you like tell them, they're like, oh, now I get it. So I was like, I'm going to just start doing stuff on social media. I had a social media page. I don't really know what I was trying to do with it. It wasn't really food science focused. It was more just food focused. And I was like, I should use like kind of like a niche because food science is very niche to help teach people. Honestly, don't know where I came up with the whole slide in science in 60 seconds. I knew that it needed to be short. At the time, TikTok limited you to 60 seconds. So I was like, okay, my video has to be 60 seconds or less. I was like, I think that people's attention spans aren't great now. So I was like, it should be under a minute and to get this concept across very quickly. So that's kind of like where I started. And I was like, we'll do science in 60 seconds, teaching people this food science concept in 60 seconds, which is challenging, especially some people ask for some complex things. And I was like, that's hard to do in a minute. But my advisor in grad school, Dr. Rodriguez, he like anytime we had a test, so he like taught classes even when I was an undergrad, he usually had a question on the test, like explain this concept as you're explaining to someone that's in 5th grade. Because if you're able to explain it in a way to really anyone without the background, then that means you have like true knowledge of that concept. And I've taken that with me like throughout my entire life because I believe that science should be accessible and is for everyone. Like, I think a lot of times people think science isn't approachable because they're like, people are using these huge words. I don't know what any of this means. But you don't have to do that. You can kind of explain things in a way that everyone can understand it.
What lasting impact do you hope to have on the food system?
You know, the reason I started the page was to, I think, get people more interested in science and not think of science as something boring or scary or not for me. And the more people that I bring along with that, I think is really what I would do, what I set out to do. And I think I'm already doing that. There's a lot of people that are like, I love these videos. I always learn something, which is really important to me because I think in the social media world, I think there's like too fast social media, like obviously entertainment, you're just like mindlessly scrolling. But when you find something, when you actually learn something, because I've learned a lot of stuff on YouTube, on TikTok, Instagram, when you learn something that you can kind of take to your daily life and then use that's amazing. And I was like, I watched this video for a minute and I took something away that either I learned and that's really cool. And now I think science is interesting and maybe I want to research it more, which I always encourage people like that follow me. Like if they have, because someone's like, people are always asking, do you have any like journal articles like on this or just a lot of things? And I'm like, yeah, like look this up or do this. I love when people are like, I want to learn more. So yeah, that's like kind of that's amazing. I don't really know how to track like how many people are actually learning, but I love like when people either like send me a DM, comment on a video, just saying like, thank you, or just, I learned something today. I didn't know that. That's great.
For her day job, social media maven Brittany Towers Lewis is lead product developer in the sauces and condiments division of Kraft Heinz. You can learn more about her and 5 other food system influencers in the April issue of Food Technology. The potential for artificial intelligence, and in particular generative AI, to revolutionize the prediction, discovery, design, and optimization of food innovation is immense. In one of the keynote sessions at last month's IFT First annual event and expo, a panel of experts explored the synergies between AI and the global science of food community. Food Technology's Deputy Managing Editor Kelly Hensel spoke with one of the panelists, Justin Hahnemann, who leads worldwide retail and consumer goods go-to-market and Amazon Web Services about the potential impact of generative AI, the challenges in adoption, and use cases for the food industry.
Earlier this summer, Food Technology's editor-in-chief spoke to food futurist Tony Hunter. And as you might expect, AI did come up during the conversation. Anything involving the future is, of course, going to bring up AI. And Hunter said that any company that doesn't have a definitive AI strategy by the end of 2024, he believes will be so far behind that they may never recover. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
There are three categories of companies, I'll say. And if you think about my role, I lead worldwide retail and consumer goods go to market here at AWS, and starting there, right? And we work with every day, like I'm on calls or in person with some of the largest retail brands and largest consumer goods brands, and also the startups, which is fascinating. So just give you some groundwork, right? For some, they already had machine learning expertise on staff. They had maybe clean data in the startup space, digital native brands, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They were able to very quickly start testing and using large language models and foundation models. And so I would call those early adopters. Then there are others that maybe had to lean into a consultant, or they didn't have the staff or the technology or the knowledge, because not everybody has a significant staff of people, especially in the machine learning space. You know what I mean? And so for them, they're testing, maybe they're just getting started with some use cases. And I would say earlier days. And then, so that would be bucket number two, kind of fast followers. And then I would say the late adopters would be bucket number three. And for some, it could be, you know what, guys, not so sure about this AI thing. Or our business has grown just fine. We don't need that. There are a couple of companies that I think you'll find that are outliers that would say that for the vast majority, they recognize this as a game-changing technology. They recognize the need to have clean and available data, and they're in testing. And this is not an IT thing. This is business and IT. So, when you think about those that are, I'd say that kind of first group, I mean, those are some of the characteristics that you'd see, in that area. I wouldn't put some sort of timeline on it. Here's why I say that. 14 months ago, most people didn't even know what generative AI was. Yeah. Most people, okay? Mm-hmm. 14 months ago, if I said the words to you, large language model, foundation model, or prompting, you would go, I don't know what that is. And oh, by the way, we are now calling all of it AI. And within that, there's machine learning, there's natural processing, there's generative AI. AI has been around since the 50s. AI, which includes machine learning, by the way, is part of that.
Yeah.
It's already being used by many companies in their production processes and in the food safety world for quality inspection, personalization on Amazon.com, how we do forecasting, how we move our robots around fulfillment centers. That has nothing to do with generative AI.
For generative AI, what do you see as its ability to play a role in food science, or how is it already impacting food science?
So a couple of ways to think about it. You could think about generative AI as, first of all, the ability to use these models to go through large data sets very quickly is significant, right? So you could see use cases in the food production and food science space upstream in literally the sourcing, the development of crops and agriculture. There's already significant AI, by the way, being used there, but generative AI could help in that space. Mm-hmm. It could help in the production process, like how you take product and manufacture a finished food product. Generative AI could help in reducing waste, if you think about food waste and whatnot, and enhance product quality. There are a number of areas where our customers in the food space are already testing these models out to see, hey, is it valuable here? Is there a use case here? Is there a value from using generative AI in this use case,
right,
or not? One thing I'll just clarify for you in these buckets, what we're finding, a lot of our customers, like those areas that I just mentioned, they'll have use cases, but the use cases that they develop could be solved with basic data problem, or a repair or master data management, reporting, or traditional AI. It doesn't necessarily need generative AI. And so that's the other interesting thing. We're getting a lot of customers that are defining what they think is a generative AI use case, but really it's something that could be solved with machine learning, or it's really just a problem because they can't get access to data. And that's easy for a digital native startup with one back office system.
Right.
Not so easy with, and you'll hear some stories with customers of ours like Kellanova. You've got various different ERP systems. You've got retail point of sale data coming in. You've got syndicated data for customer data. It's a challenge, right?
Yeah, a considerable challenge for sure. Well, you did mention a little bit food waste, how it could kind of help there. And that's one of the issues, that companies are looking at for sustainability, right? Practices. How else could AI or generative AI be utilized to kind of revolutionize sustainability for these companies?
Yeah, a couple of interesting areas there. I think if you think about like food safety and traceability, right? The ability to use the AI algorithms to like look at the data from sensors, detect potential food safety issues, and or contamination and or spoilage. Like think about food quality, right? That's a significant part there. If you think about even upstream in terms of soil conditions, crop health, weather patterns, like there's a lot of different data elements that come into how you manufacture food, for example, or grow, right? The growth part, the agriculture part. There's an opportunity there for optimization to reduce, resource usage as well as like increase yield.
Yeah.
If you think about downstream, like to the the actual consumer that's buying food, their experience in getting fresh food at the right time and where it's not spoiled, there's all kinds of ways that the AI models can help put the right product right place depending on who's shopping a store.
Yeah.
From an environmental perspective, if you think about like distribution, consumption, food production, like there's a lot of areas in there for waste reduction. And so the idea here is, remember, these models can move through data very quickly and process that data very quickly and generate an output or recommendation. And so the idea is that potentially you could use your resources more affordably and more efficiently, and also reduce the amount of food waste.
Yeah, I imagine that supply chain management and tracking all the way through the supply chain from the farm to the table is critical for that, right?
We often say farm to fork.
Yeah.
For traceability. And if you're thinking about if you ever have a recall or something like that, that's the holy grail. You want to call it that?
Yeah, right.
Feel you have that visibility. Or I have a bag of chips here and I scan the QR code. It says where it was made.
Sure.
That is not very easy though.
No.
So the reason it's not easy is back to what we said earlier: disaggregated systems, right, that don't connect.
Yeah.
And also the upstream producers are often not like linked. Their systems aren't linked into like the actual manufacturer or to the retailer. And so it's not an easy proposition to do that. You can tag the packaging with where it was produced, what facility, the date, and all of that. That part is very doable. It's just when you start to get back upstream from there that becomes a challenge.
So companies, on the early or the late adopter area, let's talk about them. What are their biggest challenges? Why are the barriers to them adopting, generative AI in their processes?
For some, it could just be prioritization, right?
Yeah.
It starts with your leadership. So if your leadership decides, hey, you know what, technology is going to be a competitive advantage for us. Technology is going to be an important enabler for us. The second is then having a defined goal or a set of projects that are going to be viewed by the leadership and owned by the leadership, where there's someone that says, I own this, and here's what we're going to do and by when, and here's what we're expecting to get out of it, putting budget against it. And then a good set of metrics and numbers so that you know how things are performing. The nice thing with, for example, if you tested out some of the use cases with generative AI, like if I demoed for you right now some of the use cases, you could see literally in minutes, days, like you can test out like some of your data on these models very, very quickly and decide, I think there's something here or there's not.
Yeah.
So the ability to test and learn very quickly is something really interesting. What I just shared with you doesn't require a lot of investment, except for the part about having a flexible data environment, which at first you could have a cloud instance and start putting data there and testing out some of these use cases and then accelerate your move to cloud.
Well, I'd love to get into a couple of use cases. what use cases are real versus ideal in the industry.
Here's the thing. There's a lot of excitement, right? And then I think there's now starting to be, I don't want to say confusion, but everyone's eager to know like what's really working. Primarily, when you think about like food and beverage, like the areas where we're seeing significant like effect with generative AI from the use cases is in marketing and sales and like digital commerce or customer experience. That would be first and foremost. I mentioned images, so this is a whole other area on the creative side. I find this to just be like a potential disruptor and game changer because of how good the image models are. And like the accuracy, the ability to take product and put it in different environments, you would not even know, and I worked for Coca-Cola for 10 years. So I know how it used to work, call agency, big meeting, kickoff, tell you what you want. They go away for 4 weeks, come back, show you a bunch of images and argue over it. Like in minutes, I can do what took weeks and hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So agencies, their roles are changing dramatically. Consultants, their roles are changing dramatically. But images are extremely tight and very, very good quality. The models are only getting better. The ability to do like, sell if you're selling shelf-stable food online, the ability to do like titles, bullets, descriptions, AdWords. And then I'll throw out one more, like especially as it relates to food, but I think upstream, like sourcing, procurement, looking at contracts, sifting through all those contracts. There's a lot of text.
Yeah.
The ability to make sense of those contracts in a way that helps with purchase price variance, price variance, payment terms, those types of things. I think is a really interesting use case. I'll throw out one more. We have a big food service customer that's using generative AI to put the right information in the hands of their route drivers and delivery agents and store salespeople in a unique way. These are all real use cases. So
pretty cool.
What I would say, areas that are challenged right now are where you need to make sense of multiple inputs. So like in demand planning or forecasting or automated replenishment, like I've got to pull data from multiple systems and make sense of it. Models are not so good at that yet, but they will improve over time. Again, 14 months in, the quality that's already here with these other use cases is incredible.
Justin Hahnemann leads the worldwide retail and consumer packaged goods go-to-market team at Amazon Web Services. He's also Amazon's worldwide segment leader for food and beverage. For more on the AI keynote panel and a full wrap-up of events at this year's IFT First event, check out our recap in the September issue of Food Technology.
Thank you to this episode's sponsor, IFT Membership. Satiate your hunger for knowledge, connection, and career growth with an IFT membership. Discover the benefits and activate yours at ift.org/membership.
And that wraps up this episode of Omnivore. Thanks again to all our guests and my colleagues at Food Technology. Omnivore is produced and distributed by the Institute of Food Technologists. If you enjoyed today's show and want to learn more about Food Technology Magazine or how to join the conversation by becoming an IFT member, visit ift.org/membership. For more in-depth discussion about innovation in the science of food, check out IFT's other podcast, Side Dish, on the news and publications page of ift.org. If you have comments or suggestions for future shows, just send us an email. The address is editors@ift.org. For the entire team at Food Technology and IFT, I'm Bill McDowell. Thanks for listening, and join us again for our next episode.